I am tired of all these streaming apps.
Oh my God, what's wrong now?
$10 a month, $20 a month, and if you get the no ads plan, it's suddenly triple.
Ugh, yeah, that hurts.
I just want to listen to music without worrying about costs, shuffle it, hear surprises, pay less.
You can.
Wait, what?
This.
Oh, wow, I forgot this song even existed. What app is this?
No app. That's 98.9 The Bull. That's called radio.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her guests bring you insightful conversations to awaken heart and soul consciousness. Come journey with us exploring the meaningfulness of astrology's energetic cycles and get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sue Minahan. This is Talk Cosmos. And today, actually the day you're going to be viewing this is on the 5th of April. But I am pre-recording because our wonderful guest has a workshop the day before, which we might mention later on. But the subject is Uranus. And hey, Uranus is a little bit off the counter anyway. It's far memory as far as evolutionary astrology refers, and Mark Jones, who is our guest, refers in his books. And besides that, it's just awakening. It's individuation. It's like, hello, today, here I am. So let's get started. We're ready.
In the first week of the month, Talk Cosmos ignites a conversation exploring planet cycle relationships in a cosmos to understand their archetypal consciousness and meaningfulness for individuals and the collective. Blending world events, mythology, and philosophy, these are the astrologers identifying the deeper impact of the planet's buzzing in our daily lives.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, founder of Talk Cosmos since 2018. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, consultant, speaker, writer, vibrational astrology student, Dwarf Planet University graduate, Kepler Astrology Toastmasters Club charter member. I have a fine arts music degree plus a certificate in jazz. I'm an artist, musician, and certified color energy life coach. Especially, I love mythology and esoteric philosophies.
And I'm Dr. Laura Tad. I work as a spiritually oriented psychological astrologer with students and clients around the world. As a counselor, writer, and educator, I love helping people recognize their inner strengths, take advantage of auspicious moments, and navigate times of challenge with greater ease. On my own podcast, Mythic Sky Storytime, I discuss astrology, mythology, and actualizing our full potential. Learn more at mythicsky.com.
Plus, a special guest who we will introduce in just a short moment.
And as the ancient Hermetic code reveals,
as below, so above. As above, so below.
Hi, Laura. I never grow tired of hearing that. That's always like, yes, true, yes. Well,
Yeah, good to be back.
indeed, yes. It marches on, doesn't it? Boy, that was a good one. Okay, well, let's get to our wonderful guest. It is Mark Jones. Hi, Mark.
Hi, thanks for having me. Nice to be back.
It is. I know it's a real treat, and especially about Uranus. I was really glad that this interested you. So let's tell a little bit about Mark. Mark, his website is Mark Jones Astrology, and it's very complete. Later, I'll show a few at the break, various things in it. But he's a prolific. He's an international astrologer and consultant. He's a psychosynthesis therapist and hypnotherapist, an international speaker, workshop classes, and author. Has 3 books, which are the following: Healing the Soul, The Soul Speaks, The Planetary Nodes, and Collective Evolution. And you can reach Mark with with extras, podcasts, and videos, and all kinds of goodies, and some upcoming events, all at Mark Jones Astrology. And Mark lives in Wales, south part of Wales. So it's a little bit across the water. especially for me. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world here. Small, beautiful, lots of beautiful natural scenery here in Wales, but very green because it rains so regularly and prolifically. Yeah.
Do you have rainbows? Lots of rainbows too, yes?
Yeah, the last really major walk I did with my researcher talking about the future, and we'd gone out without proper coats because it looked like a nice day, and we were suddenly being rained on. We turned round and there was the most beautiful double rainbow over the little village of Usk on the River Usk. And it was stunning. And it was just as we were talking about the future and our sort of faith and vision and hope. And suddenly, dripping wet though we were in inappropriate clothes, suddenly the sky rewarded us with this vision. So, yeah.
That's splendid. Really, it's a miraculous thing. Rainbow. Truly. Well, good. You just transported me. That was, yes, okay. To Uranus. It's a strange planet on its side, going backwards. Sometimes I wonder, maybe I always think perhaps Uranus has it correct and the rest of us are just operating in the wrong direction. And there is no right and wrong, but it is revolutionary just by the fact of its orbit. It does orbit around the sun 84 years, and that's what brings us to the fact that we're entering Gemini, which we haven't had we had it at a little as 2
dipped
months.
its toe, but not really.
Exactly, last summer, which was immediate. There was AI occurring. Now I use it occasionally, to get feedback about this or that or something. But we'll be keeping in, for those people listening, the first ingress was on the 7th of July, 2025 to November of 7th, and then it went into Taurus. So as of the 25th of April, because it's really the 26th right at midnight, but it's in some areas it would be
in the world.
Yeah, I think in some areas it's the 25th. So it's the 25th of April, 2026 until finally May 22nd, 2033 for all accounts. Perhaps we want to talk about Uranus as far as the archetype. It was a primordial god of the sky. It mated with Gaia just to create with the sky and the earth, along with quite a few other powers of being. Laura, you have a thought?
I tend to archetypally parallel it more with Prometheus, which is what
we'll do that next. We have two of them.
But yeah, Uranus is the sky god, the beginning of everything, right? That chaos that is sometimes attributed to Uranus of the non-forms, and being the sky god, it's pre-form. It's the lacks the structure that we get with his son Saturn, right? In response to that, similar to how like every sign is in response to the previous one, right? Saturn's and the chaos of his father leads to the hyper organized Saturn.
Yes, time. Like there is time. It isn't just a
So it's
myriad
Saturn
thing that goes
doesn't
by.
exist yet. So linear time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's prior to that
Right.
as an archetype, and so there is a unstable energy that Uranus brings in because it lacks that stability that is Saturnian, that doesn't
That's a
come
good
in.
word. Yeah. What I also consider is the fact that in mythology there were children afterwards, along with that time that began with his son Saturn, the next planet in, saying, okay, we're going to have
and I think some of the, in astrology.
There was also, go ahead. Let's go on. Anyway, the other things happened, unless Mark, you had, okay. Prometheus. But I was going to say, though, I think a little bit about Venus, because it is interesting that along with it came that desire, because a lot with free will, which has to do perhaps with Prometheus, or is the fact that our desire constitutes what what manifests, how are we truly feeling? It isn't just, oh, I think I'm going to have a unicorn tomorrow, but it's how it's integrated in that sense of embodiment of desire. So it's part of our
I think
heritage.
part of it, I see it as responsive, right? I sometimes with clients talk about Uranus can be like a riptide. And if you are caught in a riptide, you have to swim sideways to get out of it. You will die of exhaustion trying to swim to the shore straight ahead. So that's that coming at things at an angle, having to do it a little differently, having to be inventive in how we approach things.
It's quite shocking that, though, isn't it? But that actually happened to me in Greece in my 20s, and I was a strong swimmer, and I have never felt anything like it. I mean, I would have just not made it. So I kind of went like half a mile off course and just trudged back along the other beaches in the road, because you could only swim an angle.
Yeah.
Otherwise you were kind of doomed. And that fascinated me, the visceral kind of survival thing that kicked in when I realized that, and how quickly I started adapting and just accepting the fact that, just in my trunks, I'd be walking along this unknown part of road.
Right.
But I was just like, that doesn't matter, frankly, compared to this. Yeah. Quite a profound image, isn't it? And this sort of shock of desire, I mean, Prometheus, it's a kind of desire, isn't it, to serve humanity, to illuminate them, to warm them, to cultivate literally culture. The fireside is where people gather and start to form cultural narratives, look at the sky, start to talk about astrology or the stories of the shapes in the sky. And yet it comes at this kind of shocking cost, doesn't it, in the hierarchy of the gods? We talked about Uranus, and then there's the sun Saturn, and then there's Zeus, Jupiter, the son of Saturn, this strange lineage, often, killing the father, or, trying to escape the clutches of that institution. And of course, Zeus is enormously punishing of Prometheus. There's a kind of tragic limitation, isn't there, even inside Prometheus's enormous act of cultivation or enlightening, literally enlightening act.
It does seem to me, too, looking at that with the liver, the mythology of Zeus becoming the eagle of the great, and then coming and eating the liver daily, because in some metaphysical health, the liver represents grief. And I've often thought that there is this profound, it's one of the hidden, or it's not hidden, because I know with Uranus we bring up the idea of the trauma, but it is part of the nature of life that it hasn't been all roses. There's thorns along the way. And
and in some situations and in some cultures and individual and collective situations that people find themselves in, standing out in a dysfunctional family is not necessarily something you feel rewarded for, is it? It's not like, let's put your pretty picture, or, Jane just did a wonderful dance and the family are all clapping and showering love. In a dysfunctional family, being exposed for your individuality or standing out might be punitive. And we see this culturally in a variety of contexts too. There's a cost to individuation sometimes, isn't there? The existing social group doesn't understand your stance. If you grow up a Mormon and you question, you're suddenly maybe losing family and friendship groups on a level that is part of your exploration of who you are, but has all these embedded costs interpersonally.
And I think linked with that, because it took me a little while, because initially in studying astrology, I hadn't come upon EA. EA found me, and a little over about 15 years ago. But that idea, originally Uranus being like, it's about our uniqueness and our individuation. Like, how is that also trauma? And what you're speaking to, Mark, of that either we are out of fear of rejection or being traumatized or rejected for our uniqueness, we fail to, or we shut that part of ourselves down. We don't step into our authenticity out of fear of rejection or trauma, or we are traumatized for stepping into that. And that then, there can be past life memory of, oh, well, I was persecuted for being my unique self prior, so I'll just pretend and wear a costume that feels ill-fitting because that feels a false sense of safety, which also creates trauma.
I also understood asking as well, because I was gravitated towards EA, which folks, that's what we call evolutionary astrology, is a little acronym. And I was curious, like, well, okay, where does the trauma come in? However, when I think of that planet, and as had been described, changes happen, lightning. It's like you see it today, you see the whole thing and it's gone. But the change in life, some ruler comes in and sweeps over your country, your nation, your village, your home, and you have no longer your family or your ways of being. The quickness of change, or future shock, the book, you don't keep in step with the changes. There can be this shock and this grief, and that is also linear as far as embedded memory of families and whatnot.
I think of the literal lightning bolt example of, I think his name was Tony Sikoria, and he's literally hit by lightning in a phone box making a call, and luckily the person so it shows how long ago it was that it's a phone box, but the person stood next to the phone box waiting to make the next call just happened to be a paramedic and saved his life from a literal lightning strike. And in the aftermath of that, Tony started to hear music in his inner mind, his contemplative inner life, and he started changing his career and composing classical music. But these enormous changes, literally being inspired from within in some sort of like Mozart-induced lightning move. I'm not saying necessarily at the same talent level, but the same internal hearing process. There were problems in his marriage then. It ultimately cost him relationships. It was such a radical, shocking life change and some kind of actual inner shift. So even the most inspirational narratives, because surely being struck by lightning and suddenly being able to hear music is kind of wild, can have these strange hidden costs. Because, just think about it in personal growth. Someone undergoes therapy or makes a commitment to some sort of regimen spiritually or something like that, and they suddenly find their values change, and then the set of drinking buddies they had from college, they don't have the same relationship to them. All of those things come with cost, though, because we're social animals, aren't we? We want to participate.
It's that fear of success for people.
Yes.
I'm by myself up here. Where are my buddies?
Yes.
Same idea. Well, let's see. Well, thank you both. This is in depth. And we have Gemini. Uranus is in Gemini. And Gemini.
Not quite. Yeah.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
About to
Today
be.
isn't quite. Yes,
Yeah.
We're on that precipice looking at it. So it's the twins. One is mortal, one is immortal. Castor and Pollux. Hermes, or Mercury, is the planet and also the god, the messenger of Zeus that can go to psychopomp, that can go down into Hades below and talk to us, and does talk to us. It's ideas, curiosity, everything else. It's going to be quite a venture in air. Yes.
Well, and it's an escalation, isn't it, of the Mercury principle. You see Uranus in Gemini often, and it's interesting because the planetary nodes, the north node of Uranus, all the planets having nodes, is in Gemini. And you often see when Uranus is in Gemini, these accelerations in communications or Mercury-related functions or radical technological breakthroughs. So, shocking and traumatic event though it was, Hiroshima in the summer of 45, it has Uranus on the midheaven, and that Uranus midheaven conjunction is on the north node of Uranus in Gemini. And you have this shock and awe, don't you? The world takes in what the nuclear breakthrough could actually mean in geopolitical terms, something we're directly dealing with still today.
Yeah.
These are still motivational reasons for actions occurring in the contemporary world. And you see this acceleration of the Mercury principle. But your point about the twins is interesting and important, isn't it? Castor dies. They're hero brothers together, fighting with the Argonauts, having tales of fun and adventure like some Greek hero, and one dies in battle. Yeah. And then the request of the other through the love, the immortality is what, in this sense, symbolic perhaps of some other potential of the mind, the higher potential, the link to the sacred. Because what we will witness, it seems to me, in the world, there can be a sort of unhinged quality to Uranus in Gemini when just the Mercury function is exaggerated without that Jupiter or without that counterbalancing understanding of the big picture or the sacred. And as we were talking or just mentioned briefly before, AI does seem to be the current vogue. And, Uranus having gone into Gemini last year for a few months and come back again, and maybe it being in late degree Taurus is good to assess the values of where it appears to be headed. Well, large language models seem to have exploded on the world, don't they? And if that's not the ultimate embodiment of the sort of innovative exaggeration of Mercury, I don't know what it is. It has literally raided the great literature and bodies of work in the world in order to analyze it algorithmically. And the scale of the data might shock people. I mean, it was enough that Google that has Google Books. Google Books wasn't enough for Google Gemini. They had to buy access to other data sources because even the entirety of Google Books wasn't enough for a large language model to learn. So we're talking this mass raid of the pre-existing intellectual property, if you like, of humanity over generations to produce these syntactical and grammatical and conceptual shifts and responses to it. But it's new and innovative in the sense of the correlation, which is incredible, but it is raiding pre-existing human cultural embodied effort. It's not out of nowhere. It's not a rabbit out of a hat in that sense.
It just reminded of course, to me, the greatest tragedy was the burning of Alexandria, the library. And not that this is the whole library, but it is some kind of a touchstone of it, although there are other libraries and I guess, but still there's that idea. And I don't know at best, but it is incredible, some of the information. I look for long cycles, like I was looking at Saturn and Neptune, and it turns out that there's this huge 6,400 year cycle that it has that I couldn't find with my data. And and I hope it seems to be evident. Mercury, and I'm reminded too that Mercury and Uranus are octaves, or at least considered to be.
Yes.
And Mercury was the first, or Gemini was the first ruler of astrology.
Well, and that octave point is interesting because you could say you would contrast in the mutable cross Mercury ruling Gemini and Virgo, and then Jupiter, Sagittarius, and Pisces on some level. So Jupiter would be the normal kind of expansive polarity to Mercury in the sense of, the larger faith or vision, that the data you're collecting. You could say Mercury in Gemini is raw data. Mercury in Virgo is the discrimination, how to use the data. And the discrimination in Virgo is based on what? Sagittarius, Jupiterian principles. Why would I need this data? What worldview does it fit into? But Uranus in Rudyard's concept was the higher octave of Mercury. And Rudyard's much more radical at that point. He's like, higher octave does not mean the same thing, just operating on a slightly higher level. He pointed to a radicalism in that Uranus, if you like, is some sort of non-local or non-linear field of information, and that Mercury is the specific, localized conceptual data bits within that. It's an interesting terrain because, I don't know about you guys, but I wonder sometimes if people have caught up with how their television works, never mind their laptop or their smartphone. So the idea that we're psychologically ready for these degrees of accelerated innovation is deeply questionable. And we're only going to see this acceleration increase, aren't we, over the next 7 or 8 years? I think that's the cat's already out of the bag. It's already happening, isn't it? And you're seeing it in warfare too, the use of AI to program multiple drone strikes. We're seeing the radical decentralization of drone use in warfare, mainly being perfected by the Ukrainians in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, impacting this current conflict that even large-scale military power struggles to stand up to the relatively cheap an effective use of remote controlled drones to explosively target ships, for example. And so you have the might of the Russian Navy, mainly stuck at port because of Ukrainian successful drone strikes. And this is all in the similar thing. They're all programmed now, multiple drones using AI to keep the drones in tandem and then make localized movements at the end to avoid missile strikes that would defend against them. So the AI is already real world impacting, isn't it? And we've already heard the tragic stories of people who fell in love with their AI, or young people whose AI helped them plan their suicide and write a suicide note. I mean, it's tragic in that sense.
They have bars where you can go and date your AI avatar. They sit there. I was just shocked it was on TV. I thought, oh my gosh.
Well, and this is the ultimate Gemini distortion, isn't it? Which is something like, all we are words, or all people are objects in space. There's no sense of presence at that point. There's no sense of the radical
embodiment. Yes.
Yeah. Or the power of the human heart, or the real presence contained inside you, your uniqueness as a human. And instead, just because AI tells you effectively a version of what you want to hear, because it's very interesting in large language model programming with individuals, it goes through a sycophancy phase, because AI is programmed to get you to say as much to it as possible so it can learn more rapidly and effectively. And the sycophancy phase is effectively telling you everything you want to hear, so you'll keep talking to it. And then people are so vulnerable right now, so lost, and they seem so decentered on some level. There's been such a loss of essence or sense of the human soul that people are vulnerable in that sycophancy phase to thinking, oh, this is my true friend manifesting through, this large language model. And it's not, is it? It's not a real presence. It's a weird, innovative adaptation to past real presences.
I'm kind of thinking when you're a baby or a child, it's sent. Well, I'm not to get that could go into wrong morphs and stuff, because I'm thinking of the acceptance. But I think it's more than that. Forget that idea, but the idea that we're trained just with schooling in general to listen and repeat, and therefore and innovate on it's time for a break. Oh my goodness, how could that be? This is so much fun. Well, we're going to do that in just a moment, and we won't go into the 84, but there were different years, folks, and you can look here to see a little bit about because it wasn't all gloom and doom. There are quite a few amazing things. There's the good and the bad, just like we were saying.
Well, and I do think it's important, because it's easy to tip into the dystopian narrative right now. But to, particularly thinking like, it was World War II, and it was the Revolutionary War, and it was in the US, and the Civil War in the US. Yes, it was true, but there was also revolutionary language. It was a declaration of independence that kicked off the Revolutionary War. That's, to me, this Uranus Gemini is revolutionary language, because I don't think of either archetype as particularly warmongering.
No, and that was you have to think that for many people across the world, the foundation of the United States and what it represented for many centuries was a high point in potential freedom, religious and other personal freedoms.
Religious, political, we can't really comprehend how radical of a statement it was to split from England.
Yeah, I won't go on about how you guys just didn't want to pay the taxes and, just annoying renegades. I won't take that stance, because it's not really true, is it? It was a profound moment in the history of Western civilization, wasn't it? And America stood for a long time, and still stands to some extent as a symbol of that potential for creativity and freedom at its best.
Hope. Yeah. We hope. That's, I guess, yes. And okay, we'll take a break and we'll come back. And I am mentioning here about the planetary nodes that Mark has written a book. And thank you, Pope. Tune right back. We have lots more. Thanks. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We're currently in the period of Aries. By leaving a cycle based upon completion, the energy of Aries sparks initiation, creating action to separate into a new cycle of life. It's a fire sign, which means it will involve great emotion.
And because separation may create resistance, it also takes great courage to break away to new ways of becoming.
Talk Cosmos ignites insightful conversations to awaken heart and soul consciousness with hour-long programs every Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific on KKNW. Also available to watch live on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel and Facebook page. While you're there, make sure you click their like and subscribe buttons so you get the full Talk Cosmos experience. You can listen to earlier podcasts since 2018, either on most podcast carriers or under the video tab on Talk Cosmos YouTube. To join our expedition and find out about upcoming programs, sign up for the newsletter at talkcosmos.com and launch your week into the cosmic wonder.
This is Martha Norwalk. Every Sunday morning, beginning at 9 a.m., thanks in part to newprosupplements.com, we cover the world of animals. This week, it's our energy balancing show with best practitioner Linda Rasmussen. We'll take your phone calls, and Linda will help you and your animal friends with emotional, behavioral, and physical issues. Hope you can join us for your free remote treatments. Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Get your daily dose of variety. Alternative Talk 1150.
I always love that idea about the animal. I might listen one day more. Well, we'll just look at some of these charts if something sticks out, because we don't have to cover all this material, but so far, at any rate. But go ahead.
Briefly, because we touched on Venus a little bit just in the mythology of Uranus, and it's interesting that they're conjunct in this ingress. Right. And so part of that mythology is being lived into in the coming weeks, when this week in late April, just shy of a month from now. So I think that there's this value driven piece that is part of this revolutionary language. What are we going to how do we want to transform things and have there's an ethics, I think, that gets tied into it, having Venus there, that feels very valuable in these really.
It's an echo of the late Uranus and Taurus for ages before, too, isn't it? That the ruler should be there as it goes into Gemini. But it's also this exceptional Pluto trine the whole time, isn't it? Uranus and Gemini is being accelerated by the Pluto Aquarius trine. And we were talking about innovation, and that is an important theme, because it just seems to me, it was early Gemini. It was the ingress into early Gemini in the 1440s. Gutenberg produces the movable print face, so you can produce multiple books en masse without like monks having to hand copy them out. Revolutions in intellectual thought. You could argue, and certainly this has been argued in a book called The Gutenberg Parenthesis, that era is being foreclosed in this current innovation, that we've gone from the era of reading and the internal voice that's produced by having to read words and then sort of picture them in your mind, or something like that. If you pick up Pride and Prejudice or something, you're reading it, but you're creating
the imagination,
your image of Mr. Darcy or whomever, right? And it's like, they argue that might be over now, that we're witnessing with the evolution of screens, of podcasts, that the era of the kind of narrative literate voice that began with Gutenberg in the 15th century under a Uranus Gemini, Uranus late Taurus into Gemini, he's actually developing the type. And I think there's a point to this. I don't want to just bemoan that. There is clearly a loss, by the way, if people stop reading altogether, which is the current trajectory, is that less and less people read substantive books. But although there is the innovative thing of like Substack and other, long format podcasts and other ways of accessing information, I don't think we need to be too conservative dads scared of that necessarily. But we also have to note that is a big shift, isn't it? From a longer format book that you read on your own and you create the internal world in response to it. Me as a kid reading Lord of the Rings or something and it taking forever and, thinking Gandalf's dead for a whole week and being really upset about it. Like that is, that's changing. That's really changing. And it's part innovation, but we also have to be careful we have to note the potential loss, and some people have to stand for maintaining that, because the danger of some of the tech is quite simple, isn't it? It's monstrously profound tech. Most people have more power in their cell phone than in the Apollo mission rockets had in totality. And yet we're playing whatever, Angry Birds or Tetris, or just, doom scrolling or flicking through social media or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean more profound engagement. And that's what we have to watch. This short form, YouTube shorts, Facebook, Instagram shorts, and the sort of ADD kind of phenomena of that is a very Uranus Gemini kind of concern, isn't it? Like, what happens to deeper, longer engagement?
I'm thinking, yes, the stories ever since time. We've learned auditory, and I know why that we have all the mythology, and the mythology also had so many other contexts. It related, and it was from learned down to people that weren't learned, but it was that imagination. And I'm thinking too, what promotes imagination sometimes is knowing, perhaps as language changes, we need better verbiage, better language and words in order to hint, to connect thoughts and whatnot.
Yeah. But now we're moving into the vast range of emoticons, aren't we? As the kind of response, or the classic thumbs up, which I overuse when people message me. Yeah.
I wish they had a new one. I go like, maybe.
And my daughter, who's 7, and is a child of this, she likes nothing more than to just choose about 50 emoticons to send, like Nana or something on WhatsApp as some expression of her love. Yeah.
But that is so much like flipping way back with our petroglyphs and everything. In fact, we live in such a symbolic life. They have the big cross about this, or you go to the restrooms and they got the little skirt or the legs. We think, in fact, it's hard to really connect sometimes what a person's really saying, because maybe you're not cued into that.
Well, and that's part of the loss with language, right? That I just read Hamnet, which has become this huge film, but the author of the book, her use and grasp of language to describe grief is so phenomenal. And it's like you lose that when it's a quick text. When it's that's like that, it makes me want to know, because I was like, I don't know how, if you haven't experienced huge loss, you find the language to describe what she describes, because the book's about the death of Shakespeare's son.
You describe. You need context for symbols. The signs can revolutionize, but if they become too unhinged from a lack of embedded human context, then people will start to become giddy. We see this kind of like modern dizziness accompanied by a certain existential fragility about life, because there is a need for humans to have genuine in-person community. There is a need for humans to embed themselves and appreciate the natural world that they're a part of. Too much sign without enough link to the embedded world becomes dangerous to humanity. It seems to me it skews them a certain way. And we have to watch for that tendency under this huge acceleration of Uranus and Gemini, trine Pluto and Aquarius. The shift here that some people see a concern around transhumanism, the shift to get off the planet and find Mars, or wreck one world and go to another. You have to look at the shadow of that, which is the rejection of the embodied environment we're already in, the natural world.
The externalization of everything rather than the internalization, like the buck stops here with oneself, is the old adage, but it is so true. I know myself, I was just thinking, oh boy, I was going to take a trip and leave and blah, blah, blah. And I was getting all excited, which we don't much from Hawaii here. But I realized, no, what I needed to do was revamp where I live. And I realized the constant theme, and it was more symbolic. It was really internal. And I hopefully, because of communication, will help people understand. Perhaps it is that new language on one-to-one, if we really can stay connected with people, which of course we rely on, like this internet. We have 3, East Coast, Hawaii, and Britain right here, Wales.
I know. It's a
talking.
miracle that we can even talk in this way. It's a miracle. And
Yeah.
we can't knock that. We just have to watch. And I guess you saw this in the tech world itself, didn't you? You saw this almost hippie optimism to begin with. You know, we're going to connect the world. And this whole like, don't be evil. And we're going to do this amazing thing with no advertising. And then surprise, surprise, a few years later, when there was audience capture, the sponsorship and the advertising kicks in. You know, I guess we're naive if we think in this world that people aren't going to make money or trade. I mean, Gemini has its roots, doesn't it? And the Silk Route, and even the hands, the kind of bartering and the kind of baksheesh, you know, this for you here, this for me here, the mercantile process. And it's a natural part of the human world, but we have to be careful that this does not become a cynical manipulation of the human natural desire to connect.
We need to have, yes, it is. And it's a challenge here, as gifted as it is, but because one-to-one is really a great experience. But I am thinking just of us, of like-minded, for instance, to counterbalance and remind ourselves and others of that, to keep the values of Venus or whatever.
Well, you mentioned astrology with Mercury, and obviously astrology can also be linked to Uranus. And the astrology community seems to have thrived with this, because if you think about it, in a more embedded cultural world in, say, the 60s, 70s, or 80s, unless you're in a massive center like London, New York, whatever, you know, there weren't enough people with a specialized interest in astrology to gather in big groups outside of the most rare occasion. Whereas when you open it up like this, when you decentralize the way of communication, previously fringe groups like astrologers are actually coming out in droves. I mean, astrology is flowering in the world, isn't it? And it's in a very empowered place, because when people are allowed free range interest and they can come out of their relative isolation, they might not know people in the immediate 10 or 15 miles around their house, but they connect online and suddenly all these people are networking. It's incredibly exciting. I mean, it's been a beautiful thing to be a part of. The people I've met through this world.
It's changing neighborhoods.
The research that we can do as astrologers with technology, right? It's like, so I was looking to see with this trine we have, it's like, well, it's only because of software that I could, in a matter of like a half an hour, find, even though I had to go all the way back to 1649 BCE to find them trine in the same signs, I still could, if I was having to
relate that far memory, you could say, of what is now to them.
It would have been weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of work.
Well, my researcher, a young man who was creating astrology apps, contacted me a while ago, and then I hooked him up with my researcher, and he's already created an app for my researcher to go through our extensive chart database, collating events in people's lives with the signature we're looking at, say when Uranus was square their nodes or something like that. And we're producing. So what we found is, using certain forms of large language model, is that they can be very creative if you give them a big input of your unique voice to begin with. We feed them the entire transcript or a book, or, you know, tens and tens of hours of me lecturing on certain subjects. We feed that to them and then ask it to look at that. And so the apps that can aid astrological research, AI looking at material you've already done, so you're imprinting your unique perspective already and then looking at it to create structures or responses. These are really fertile areas, it seems.
For folks here, I'm going to flip from this chart, but simply, I think really what we've been talking about is this upcoming square to the nodes, which will be June 12th. But there's also a Uranus-Pluto cycle, not to go too much with it, but it really is an activation from the conjunction in 1965 and 66, when it was in the middle of Virgo, and then it squared about 10 years ago between 2012 to 15 with when Uranus was in Aries and Pluto was in Capricorn. And that was multiple times, 7 times. That's rather incredible, because often it's 5. So it was really knocking the doorbell going, hey, folks, wake up. And now we're going to go into this trine. So looking from that, it's beginning this summer, twice this year, on the 18th of July and then the 29th of November. And then it'll be systematically in the following year and the year after that. And there's a couple of charts. I don't know, there's other material to think about, but it will be, people can look at these to see, because it is, again, that tremendous archetype. And we can just talk about Uranus and Pluto, but we have a bit that transformational energy that's does both. It goes down deep and it goes wide, I think, at the same time, and high. So maybe, go ahead. Did you have a thought? Go ahead.
That Uranus-Pluto in Virgo in the 60s seems such an important signature, doesn't it? In tracking a whole series of things, from the origins of the kind of environmental movement, and even that phrase indicates to some extent our disembodiment from the natural world, that we would even talk about it in that way, but it was an important impulse. And the 60s, the project of the 60s, that I think would be passionate and important to a number of astrologers, certainly, and people of an alternative life viewpoint. But we also have to be quite sober, don't we? Because the Uranus square that you talked about, the 2012, I mean, many uprisings from your Arab Springs and other movements in the world did not work out super well. We're not like hippie fantasies of overcoming the military man or something, right? The world is not a simple place. Humanity is not in a simple place. And real power structures and geopolitical, you could say, selfish interests have not been easily replaced in this world. And even the kind of transition of the tech industry itself from a more utopian vision to more pragmatic financial buccaneering moves indicates that. I think there was an aspect of the hippie movement, without critiquing it excessively, which was deeply spiritually naive. And, we've had the long sobering reality of having to come to terms with that. And it's important to have that sobering and disillusioning reality, Saturn-Neptune conjunction. It's important to see through some of the dreams, because I guess if you're a true hippie, and I feel like I am without having even been born in that period, you care about the love spiritually, or the spiritual hope and potential of humanity, more than you care about the specific dreams of people in the 60s who might have been slightly playing around with it in the Woodstock era for a period of time and then change direction in the 1980s.
Yes, indeed.
Not to be too cynical, but I think a lot of people did do that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was a pure thing that later, amazingly, I remember my friends that would march down the freeway in Seattle, which I wasn't living there at the time. I was working 9 to 5, 5 days a week. And later they were just as square as you could be.
Yes. Well, that's another good point you make. For the vast majority of people, my parents were around there, and they had Beatles and Stones records and Beach Boys records, thank God, because that was a huge gift to my childhood, and Simon and Garfunkel and the like. But they weren't hippie. They noticed it like you notice a distant social phenomena. But I mean, it was fairly small number of people in the end in Britain, in swinging London, or in the Haight-Ashbury of the summer of 67. In the end, it was a relatively small number of people. And I don't think larger forces in humanity shift that easily necessarily. So there's a kind of thing I would say where, like, it seems to me we have to radically innovate as creative, psychological, spiritual warriors, for want of a better phrase. You have to become quite committed and quite dedicated in certain areas of life. There isn't just simply a simple feel-good answer to lots of these dilemmas that humanity is facing, and one has to do quite a substantive kind of inner focus work to stay with some of the bigger important themes, it seems to me, of wanting to live a true life.
Neptune has a great deal about this. There's a whole nother subject, having studied somewhat with Maurice Fernandez, who wrote his book. But the most interesting facet that is that whole takeaway is that book applies the same concept of Kubler-Ross of grief. That there are these
5 stages of denial.
Yeah. And here it is where the innocence of Neptune, that thinks everything is rosy, suddenly you get stung by a bee, or something happens that changes, and there's this whole layer of deep not catharsis, but of metamorphosis, you could say, of your whole aware of truth, a final truth that comes out. So, I'm going to jump and just do what we usually do for the halftime, but we'll whiz right by. Laura, we won't really say much because it's just a little identification for folks to realize who I'm talking to. Mark Jones of Mark Jones Astrology and Dr. Laura Tad of Mythic Sky. And Mark has his 3 books, Healing the Soul, Planetary Nodes, and Collective Evolution, and The Soul Speaks. And again, if you go on his site, you will see that coming up, he's involved in 2 events. One's going to be in Dublin. So if you want to get ready in September, maybe go from UAC to Europe. It'll be, or if you're in Europe, however, but check it out. And then 2, there's courses, always a lot of courses and free material. It's quite marvelous. It's a real treasure trove, you could say, of resources. Now, Laura, Mythic Sky Astrology, which is mythicsky.com, has her story time and a podcast, which about to create material that has a book that Laura is going to be writing. And also now it's online, her Cosmic Conversations, which is once a month. And we didn't change the time, but generally, if you have any questions, just email Laura.
Well, it's EDT. It's still 7. It's just
okay. Great. Yes, exact. It matters for here, folks. We never change in Hawaii, so I'm always navigating like currency. Where I am, how I am, and your book. You have Moon Journal, and it's an open-ended book with a lot of meditations and prompts to help you wherever you are work through that emotional process that the moon involves. And you can order that on mythicsky.com. And there's a little tab at the top of hers that you can find. Myself, every week we do something. And let's see, last week or recently was Vibrational Astrology with Linda Barry. And it was about the spring equinox and the vibrations that are really for the whole season. It's exciting. And coming up after you hear this, there will be about the new and full moon. So let's get back. We have a few minutes, not very many, because we have the U.S. And maybe I'll just present that, yes, it's big. And the north node of Uranus is right on the descendant. And there's this whole myriad of impacts that just the ingress itself is making. I'm going to flip through these and then we can talk because we have not too many minutes. And also, there will be a return of Gemini, which I brought up before, but I'm not even going to go into. But this country's Uranus is at 8 degrees. So looking ahead, we might get the reality of the truth.
It's a massive time, isn't it, for the US? Because there's been a Pluto return and then a Uranus return in the US chart, and the ascendant-descendant axis of the US chart being on the nodes of Uranus. I mean, if you think about it, the impact of the United States on the world, just in terms of its media influence, just in terms of television and film alone, or the modeling of US culture, how when I think about school, even though my school was nothing like an American high school, I think about the number of times me and my sister watched The Breakfast Club. I could quote the entire film at that age, just follow along with the lines. And yet our school was nothing like that, but you also grew up with American media. So the enormous influence on America like that, but it's been a, kind of polarizing or divisive time for the United States, because a Pluto return and a Uranus return within a few years of each other is kind of a big deal for a country, isn't it? And it's a real reset, or what is this country about? Yeah.
Exactly, Mark. What are we about? And can we practice what we preach? And again, who really belongs here? And if we do, if my father came from Norway, he only became a citizen because he was in World War II. And therefore he became a citizen. His folks weren't citizens. They had come through Ellis Island and all that good stuff, but he couldn't go to colleges,
That's almost the changing world order, isn't it? From that period.
Yeah.
If you think about it, that last Uranus and Gemini in the kind of 40s to now, and Neptune was in Libra, and now we have Neptune in Aries. We're changing the world order, the post-Second World War order, aren't we? And America's changing its role as that kind of stabilizer of the world order in the immediate aftermath of World War II. And we see a slightly different picture emerging at the moment. And that's kind of shocking the world on some level. Everybody's trying to find their feet. Yeah.
Well, in my heart, I really hope we can be more like cells, like this many cells of energy, not like a beehive more, where we can interact and have a community. Maybe that's an Aquarian dream.
Oh, it's a beautiful Aquarian dream.
We'll keep our dreams.
Well, here we are kind of doing it. So rock and roll. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So thank you, folks. Thank you, Mark and Jones.
My pleasure.
And thank you,
Nice to
Dr.
see you
Laura.
both.
Yeah.
It is. Oh, well, folks, may your conversations in life continue. And remember, heart matters. Keep those desires. We'll connect. Okay.
Thank you for joining this vibrant and insightful conversation on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her guests awaken consciousness by connecting heart and soul consciousness patterns with astrology's energetic cycles. Be sure to tune in next week, same time, same place, to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.